Well, hello. Every gal needs a cowboy hat.
Scanning the room, you look for a familiar face. Everyone is a stranger. Your heart's racing, you feel nauseous. New plan. You meet 4 new people. Okay, 3. 2? You can handle 2. And then you think, I hate this. This just feels so fake. And before you talk to even 1 new person, you're looking for the nearest exit.
Okay. Crazy. Yo, who invited this chick?
My heart races when I walk into a room full of strangers too. Except it's not anxiety, it's excitement. I'm not thinking networking quota. I'm thinking, look at all these stories. And I get so pumped about talking to people that I don't know.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Well, today we are going to be talking about stories, but instead of stories in manufacturing, we're going to be taking a walk into a different industry. Now, most people in manufacturing, and I dare say a lot of different industries, they struggle with how to share their story. And that's where I come in. My name is Gail Robertson, and I'm Chief Curiosity Officer with GailNow. And I help people in manufacturing tell their story when they sign up, suit up, and show up. Now, often we have difficulty because we struggle with the idea of how to not only tell our stories, but dig those stories out, but then how can we share them with the world? How can we do our duty really to share it with the world? And as you saw, when I first came on, I was looking up into the space because today I'm very excited. We're going to be talking about aerospace. And you may be wondering, okay, what does that mean? And what is it all about? Because normally I'm talking about manufacturing, the plastics world, but there's a lot of things that can be shared in common with different industries. And when we start working together, we can share ideas, we can share stories, and we can get motivated when we maybe step outside the area that we're in and learn something new. So I definitely have been challenging my curious mind lately and learning about the aerospace world. So I'm very excited today to have 2 very special guests because I am going to be meeting these women in person next month. So welcome. First up, we have Nikki Malcolm. Welcome, Nikki.
Good morning. Good morning. Thanks for having us, Gail.
And then we have Lori Nevin from the West Coast. So it is morning. It's afternoon here. But we have people listening in also that it will be evening. And there may even be some people sleeping. So, but they will watch it on the replay on my YouTube. So see, there's something for everybody. Well, welcome. So now before we get started, I do want to go to our studio audience because the exciting thing about doing live is that, well, it's live and you never know what can happen. But what often happens is we have guests in our joining our studio audience. So let's see. Oh my goodness, it's kind of busy over there. So we have, David Chrysler said this was at the start of the show. He was an early attendee, says too long for this conversation. Oh, and I think here's someone that now David is someone Lori and I know through networking. The next person I think is someone you both know. There we go, Dean Cameron. And Dean and I have connected on LinkedIn. So hello, Dean. Welcome. Great to have you join us today. Ray Zaganto. So Ray also is someone I met through networking, and we've crossed paths at a trade show recently. Ray is known as the manufacturing unicorn, and he is that. Great title for him. Katie McDermott, also another wonderful woman of manufacturing that we've got to know also through networking. And James Kunkel, another fellow in the manufacturing sphere. Thank you, James, for stopping by. So we have some people, as you can see, that are stopping in for manufacturing. David says, always get a kick out of your intro, Gail. It's just so you. Thank you. So me and so my son. My son helped with that. So Inger's here saying hello. And oh, yes. So I hope Josh Tan does. I just met Josh Tan, and Josh is also in the aerospace industry, or worked in it previously. And still perfecting my dad jokes. Get it away from my head. Oh, we're going to have I'm sure we'll have some space jokes today too. So we have Dean has dropped his contact info. That's great. For everyone else that's listening today, please drop your contact information. I'll also be asking Lori and Nikki to drop some information about their upcoming conference, and we'll get to that after. So make sure you check back. And then we have some people shouting out, saying sort of like, hey, come on over. You want to join in the conversation. So Angela, definitely also someone that's crossed over from my manufacturing world into the aerospace. And of course, Lisa Child. Welcome, Lisa. And Lisa is in a new role at Pacific Northwest Aerospace Alliance. So let's get to it. And Nikki, I'm going to have you start with maybe giving just a bit of an overview of Pacific Northwest Aerospace Alliance.
Very good.
Yeah. Okay. So if you can tell me about that, because I'm quite fascinated by when I first heard aerospace, I had one view like this, and my blinders are coming off, and I'm like, wow, this is a very fascinating world. So
Yes. So the Pacific Northwest Aerospace Alliance, we're a nonprofit trade association. Our mission is to support the global competitiveness of the Pacific Northwest Aerospace Cluster. And we do that through events like networking and conferences. We have another big event coming up in September called the Tech Innovation Conference. And our Women in Aerospace Conference, of course, is in its 9th year. So we do a lot of networking, business-to-business opportunities. We have a large conference in February every year. So we really try to do what we can to bring the industry together globally for the betterment of the aerospace industry.
That's great. So you are the executive director. Is that the correct?
Yes,
right?
CEO and executive director.
CEO and
Yes.
executive director.
Yes.
Okay, overseeing that. And then Lori, you are a board member, but also work for another company. So maybe you can give a little bit of a brief overview of what. There we go. Of what you do.
You bet. So a couple of years ago, Nikki approached me about joining the board of PNAA. I'll use the acronym because that's what we do in aerospace. We use acronyms. And Nikki was on a mission to add diverse perspectives to the board and to PNAA as a whole. And there were, our industry is well known for being mostly white male. And she knew I was also on a mission to bring diversity into aerospace wherever I could. So I jumped at the chance and joined the board. And I'm currently the chair of 2 of the committees and am very involved. And Nikki's mission to add to diversity on the board has just taken off. And one of the things we do to bring more diversity to the aerospace industry is this Women in Aerospace conference coming up next month, which you'll hear more about as we talk more. Now, my day job is I'm a project manager. I have been a project manager for about 20 years, and I have my professional certification. And I've been in aerospace for about 16 years. And it does suck you in like a vacuum. And it's a good thing because aerospace is there's so much opportunity for anyone in this industry. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that. But my day job is really working with a large team of technical engineers that are taking a customer's concept and then with that concept in mind, actually developing, manufacturing, testing, and qualifying real parts to go on real airplanes, helicopters, and space vehicles as well.
That's good. And that's a good segue to go back to Nikki, to what we were talking about earlier, that, we think about maybe aerospace, airplanes, and we think about the plane. We think about, a spaceship. We think about certain things, but there's so many levels that lead up to that. So can you maybe talk a little bit about that, and also how you got into the industry? Because sometimes I talk to people and they're like, oh no, I just fell into this. I got into it later in life. And you started 18. So let's go back to your 18-year-old self and tell me that story. And then we'll get into all of the behind the scenes.
Yes, I wish it was a little more glamorous, but I was looking for a role and I went to a temp agency and did all of the tests. And then they placed me at a company called TMX Aerospace. And they supply all the material for the in-production aircraft for Boeing. And so I really started my career right at 18 as a filing assistant for this metals company, and worked my way up through there and to a few other companies in that time. And here I am now. So it's been an incredible journey.
What I like about that story too is that it shows that, you can, here's where you start. And some people, what I always say, some people may be very happy staying in certain roles. And then there's other people that want to go up the ranks. And my guess is you likely have learned so much from remembering those early days, right? Because could you have any stories or anything comes to mind? I have one story from my newspaper world, but I was just wondering if you had one that stuck out for you as, because I did this job, it helped me later in life.
That is such a good question. Not long after I started with TMX, I took on a role that was for all of the outside processing for materials. So if we didn't have something in stock, we'd send things out to be leveled or heat treated or coil slit or things like that, chem milled. And that maybe 2-year period gave me such an incredible amount of experience about materials that took me through most of the rest of my career. I sold metal for 17 years of my career until changing over. And that really, just that couple of years of experience with that made me excel in all of my other materials roles. I'm still a bit of a materials geek. I'll never go away. I guess I picked that up along the way as well, but I'd say that's the biggest thing. And just, relationships, because I was in purchasing, and then when September 11th happened, they moved me in sales, something about I talk a lot or something. But so just the ability to build those relationships, both in purchasing and in sales, has been the key from a people perspective that's carried me through my career.
I'd like to speak to that because, Nikki, you started out with saying you were a file clerk, which I don't even think there is such a thing anymore. But my first job out of high school, I was also 18, and I've done college off and on from 18, and I never got my degree until I hit 60 years old. So college was kind of always in the background. And my first job, in order to prove myself, I was in a customer service department at a tech company, and my manager made me go through 14 file cabinets and organize each customer file in a particular order with one staple each. And that's all I did until she would give me like a new responsibility. And I'm like, okay, watch out, because I'm going to get this done. And when I got it done, she was so surprised that I could get that much organized in such a short time. She gave me another challenge that I think she was like looking for me to fail. And she gave me a list of about 200 customers that were past due on their accounts, and said, all right, your next challenge, I want all these accounts brought up to date. And that was a pivotal moment for me, that pivotal work, because I had a difficult conversation to have with each of those customers and keep them on our side so they would stay customers and collect the bills. And I learned how important business relationships are and how to keep them And Nikki, you touched on that. You know, relationship building is such a big part of what I do as a project manager now, that my organizational skills from that very first job of going through those file cabinets and relationship building, that second challenge I got, really was the foundation for the work I do today.
Those are great stories because they're also about those transferable skills, number one. And the other thing is, Nikki, we talked about this, like in manufacturing, we always say too, you know, the people that make things. And when we look at a certain industry, often we see it as, you know, that narrow view of the end product, when in fact there's a whole bunch of people behind the scenes. And you know, my story I'm a recovering journalist. So I worked at my first job, I applied at a newspaper right at a first year university, and I wrote a letter to them and said, I'll do anything at the paper. Like, I think I even said, I'll even sweep the floors. I wanted a job in a newspaper. So I got a job in the circulation department, you know, working the phones, and, you know, you're dealing, again, customer service. And I still remember one of the greatest stories that stands out for me. This older woman had called in and she didn't get her paper. And I said, oh, okay. You know, click. Well, we can reimburse you or send the paper tomorrow. And she said, oh dear, what will I do tonight at like 7 p.m. at night? And I was like, what is she talking about? Every night she did the crossword puzzle. So she got the paper. I tell you, that was a real eye opener about not everybody gets the paper because what we're writing as journalists, like people get it for all different reasons. And that story stayed with me. So I always said I never got too, as my mom would say, too big for my britches when it came to thinking that as a journalist, we were all that. Because guess what? Someone may just want the TV guide or the crossword puzzle. So yeah, it's those early days stories are very important. So thank you for sharing those. It kind of sheds a light on the industry too of aerospace. So now that leads into, since you both came out of and you're working in more behind the scenes, let's talk a little bit now about the event that's coming up. It's a Women in Aerospace 9th year. So Nikki, can you maybe give a few highlights of why is it important to have this conference?
Yeah, it is in our 9th year. We're very excited about it. It's important to have because I think that women really love having a sense of community. And that has, you know, in the past, that's been one of the things that's driven people out of the industry. So it's important. And we see this in some of those studies with young children, is that if they don't feel like there's a sense of community, that it's not something that they're interested in. And that especially applies to women. So I think it's really important for us to come together as a community and show strength in that and really help. We allow students to come and attend, students and displaced workers to come and attend the event for free. So we really introduce them into the community to help them see that it's all there. And we help educate, empower, and oh my gosh, I'm missing one. Leadership, education, empowerment, and leadership is really what we hope to drive through this event, May 20th, excuse me. Lori can tell you about it too. She's been such an incredible board committee chair for this event as well. So
sure. I guess what it comes down to for me is, on a day-to-day basis, I am generally the only woman on a conference call, in a meeting room, and doing the kind of work that I do. And so this one day a year, when the tables are turned, and there are men at the event, but 95 or 98% of the room is filled with women, it just really energizes me, motivates me, and reminds me that I am not the only one. I may be on a day-to-day basis, but those other women are out there, and it's an opportunity to make that connection.
That's great. I want to post one of the comments because I think this is something from Whitney, who said, community makes such a difference. That was a major factor in choosing my field of study in college. You know, we sometimes forget about that, you know, the need for community. And if we're going to grow in any industry and expand, you know, keeping that community, that networking, making those connections is so important. Ingrid agrees, it's really important to come together as a community. And Dean threw in, Gail, I'm still an addicted journalist. Yes, I still have.
And a wonderful one at that.
Yes, as much as I call myself a recovering journalist, mainly because I'm not working directly in that world, but I still, curiosity is a big part of my life that was really developed, in those days as a journalist. And yeah, for a lot of reasons, I'm no longer in that world, but I still use my journalism skills in a lot of the other areas that I'm working at. There's been a lot of, I will tell you this, I'm watching the comments popping up. There's a lot of networking going on. We do have here, I want to introduce, I don't know if you know Megan Ziamba, but yep. Okay. So, yeah, fascinating industry. And there are a lot of things happening within that space. No pun intended. Yes, there are fascinating things. Now, before we talk about some of those fascinating things, I do want to, I was looking at the agenda. So I don't know if you want to highlight anything in particular on, I'm pulling up that there is a couple of things are sustainable aviation aerospace, 5 steps towards inclusion. We have a development in the industry, the new work culture, sustainable aviation and aerospace with Carol Sim. Do you know what
Lori,
that?
do you want to speak to that, or I can either way?
I would love to. So in my networking, I met Carol Sim. She's affiliated with not just the University of Washington, but Washington State University. And her work is grant funded, and her roles involve developing the new technologies in aviation and aerospace. And so primarily right now, we're all concerned about climate change, and a lot of the area of her study and her work is in how to get our fuels for our air vehicles more sustainable. And so she'll be introducing some of those new technologies, biofuels, hydrogen fuels, and there's other things being developed. And of course, because we live and work in the Pacific Northwest, we are like one of the largest hubs for aerospace and aviation. And so the University of Washington and Washington State University, the state of Washington, Department of Commerce, and are all involved in the work that she's doing and leading. So it's going to be very exciting to see what's coming down the pipeline. And for, women that are looking to get their foot in the door in the industry, they're going to see this whole new world of opportunity that's coming our way.
Okay. So why is the Pacific North? Anybody have a little bit of history about that? I don't know of how it became a hub. I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's likely a lot of reasons for that. We have inexpensive energy, especially on the east side of the mountains. So for some of the electric aviation stuff, but then also we have a lot of water, which is one of the ways that they derive hydrogen for alternative fuel sources.
Okay, cool.
And as far as the Northwest being a hub, it really started with Boeing being the kind of the forerunner for all the aviation that happens in the Northwest. And, from there, they needed engineers, they needed suppliers, they needed innovative thinkers. And so all of this ecosystem started growing and building around Boeing, which now isn't necessarily the hub anymore. We have all these other amazing organizations. MagniX is leading the way on electric aviation, and they're right here in the Northwest. So there's other great things happening. And we'll hear more about that at the conference.
Yes, well, and I'm going to do it because we have also Whitney's dropped in. There's a great episode of Sharon Says So podcast about Washington Boeing. Okay. That's the other thing I love these, these questions that come up is that, I always say, we don't have to know everything. There's going to be someone probably that will know that answer. And then Carol's going to try to squeeze very unique tech into 20 minutes, a must attend presentation. Yes, there is a full day planned, which is really interesting that you've, managed to, adds such diversity in content that you're going to be having that day. So opportunities for women. Now, I did post something. I don't have the stats in front of me, but I don't think I need to read them off. But I had posted because I found an article that said, there's such small percentages of women in aerospace. Probably not. I mean, has been traditionally a male-dominated still world in that. So, where are the areas that you've seen progress, and what more needs to be done? And as I said, Megan's joining in. I know we have a lot of work ahead, but let's maybe talk a little bit about where there's been success and what next.
So I would say, we were making inroads to increasing the amount of women in aerospace. And then when COVID happened, it actually has set women back a bit as far as women in the industry. I think that really applies globally across all industries, because a lot of the women were caretakers and had to step back in a lot of ways from their roles. So I think, we are making progress on it. My belief is that we really need to see more women leaders, because as representation is really important in any sort of diversity role. And so as long as we don't have that representation, women and girls aren't going to feel like they can go for those roles. So it's really important to see women represented in leadership roles across companies, so that people feel like there's opportunity for them to be in the industry, and to understand that there's room for growth and that you're not limited.
Yeah. And I would add that with this step back that COVID has impacted diversity, it's also an opportunity. And we're going to talk about that at the conference in the New Deal session towards the end of the day. We need to be thinking what makes our work environment much more conducive to people who identify as women. And if it means they can leave the office when they need to, come back when they need to, set their own hours, create the tools that they need to work remotely, be able to have private rooms where they can go and make phone calls to daycare centers, or offering daycare reimbursement. We have to start changing the way we hire, what we offer, and the environment that people who identify as women work in. So it is more accessible.
That's good. And Megan agrees, and I do too. It says that such a group, Nikki, without that representation, women won't feel like there's a place for them. And, visibility is key. So that can lead us into, and this is an area I talk about, is the area of showing up and, utilizing social media. And I know both of you I was able to find you have LinkedIn profiles. So what for you, how have you found that transition, that journey in terms of, using social? And Lori and I met through a networking group, which, we never would have crossed paths otherwise, right? If it hadn't been for social media, it's not like we would have bumped into each other, very unlikely. So maybe I'll ask you each just talk about that journey and any tips as well.
Sure. Gail, we did meet in a really interesting happy hour networking group, virtual. It was a virtual group, or it is a virtual group. And it's managed so well. It's opened so many doors for me, including for the nonprofit that I recently established. And so through that connection with you, Gail, I've been able to bring your expertise to the conference that we're holding in May. And I've been able to introduce you to Nikki and Lisa, who's on with us now. And you met Dean through that, that connection. And I met Megan, who is doing amazing things in manufacturing to, share the world of opportunity in manufacturing. So, one connection is just like dropping a pebble in a pond, and it just ripples out. And it is because of LinkedIn I've been able to grow my network far, wide, and deep. And one of the things I've done that's a bit unique on LinkedIn is I created my own hashtag called Today in Project Management. And if you follow my hashtag Today in Project Management, you will get a glimpse of like what it's like for me every day in project management in the aerospace world. You know, I recently posted a picture of the space plane that I get to have a hand in as a project manager. And it's just so cool to actually share that with my LinkedIn world. I recently posted a picture and an article about a helicopter. It's a prototype helicopter. And, you know, this project started like in 2015, and now it's taken its first flight from Florida to Tennessee. Wow. And it's just so amazing to see. It's now real world, you know, out there. So I get to share that kind of thing on LinkedIn, and it's a lot of fun.
That is, you know, for me, I agree. I think that is the most exciting part, is seeing something when you know, like all the smaller parts. Like I worked with a company during the pandemic, and they were going to they stepped in, even though they do large molds, they were helping build the tools for mold for hand sanitizer dispenser. So in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, well, you just build a tool with that, you know, the place you put the soap on. And he says, there's 32 parts. I said, 32 parts. I was shocked at this, you know, hand sanitizer, how many parts, and there's tools needed for building that. So now I look at everything differently that's made from plastic. I'm like, and when something breaks, I go, oh yeah, that's because that was a flaw in the design likely, and they need to fix that. So anyways, it is exciting now I look at everything differently. And you know, I had a little crack in a recent, you know, case on my phone, and it was like, that's probably, you know, it was some sort of design flaw or a flaw somewhere in the process, right? So, okay, Nikki, over to you Lori. That was great, because anybody listening in manufacturing, that is a great story from beginning through to where you're going, of how connecting the dots between social media, networking, meeting in person, and none of them have to be exclusive of the other. They all can work together. And it's about, you know, taking those steps outside your comfort zone sometimes and posting things. So, okay, Nikki, over to you about your journey in social media.
Yeah. So, you know, and all of the harm that COVID and the pandemic has done to the world, some of the things that it's done are positive, right? Like shrinking the globe, because we all connect virtually now. And for me, it's especially been because you're connecting virtually over these Zoom meetings and meeting people, again, that you wouldn't normally meet or bump into, but chances are. So that I love. And, you know, as far as my social media, I really try to show the human side of the industry that I love so much, and trying to showcase how interesting it is and how much it has going on. You know, aerospace, from my perspective, encompasses space and aviation and all things flying. And so I just really try to showcase that and show my excitement and enthusiasm for the industry, so that in hopes that it rubs off and really helps people. I think sometimes, especially on the manufacturing side, it's really quite easy to get disconnected from what it is that we're actually doing. And so helping people see, like, to Lori's point, getting to see that as the future vertical lifter, you know, one of the helicopters that go, you know, sometimes the person making the hardware for that might be disconnected from what is actually happening and why it's important to the world. And so I really try to make those connections where I can, so people know, yes, I'm on manufacturing side, but it's what we do is so important globally from multiple different perspectives. I mean, the baseline being, we connect people, we help connect people, we make parts that connect people on airplanes. And, you know, how would the economy or the world be different if that didn't exist? And so it's really important to drive the connection from the people perspective, and the perspective of, you know, what we do is very cool.
That is is really great in terms of, yeah, sharing those stories. And I just want to do a shout out. There's someone that's joined us, Brian Gignac from Cavalier Tool. So I do work with Cavalier Tool, and they also had a phenomenal year during the pandemic because of their diversification. So they don't only do automotive, actually a smaller footprint in automotive, but they are diversified in a lot of different areas, which has really helped them. And they definitely know how to show up at trade shows and online. They are definitely company that has made a difference in the mold making world, really shook things up, I think, and often use that term, we make things that make things. And he's not on the call today, but or that I know of, he might be out there lurking. As Damon Pastulka says, you want to be the red M&M in the bowl of green. And that is very daunting for some people. So was that, Lori, did you have any issues with that at first with social media? Like, how did you find stepping out into the social media world and talking about, even celebrating some wins?
Yeah, well, really a win for me on social media has been, and I'll add Nikki to this win, is a gentleman that reached out and said, I want to recognize women in aerospace. And he thought about how to do that. And he came up with putting together a list of the top women to follow on LinkedIn in the aerospace industry.
Yes.
His name is Matt Higa, if anybody wants to do a LinkedIn search for him. And so anyone was able to nominate anyone who identified as a woman or nominate themselves. And he had some criteria that he was going to judge against, and it had to do with your engagement on LinkedIn. And Nikki and I both made the list in the top 60. So that was definitely a win. And what it did for me is, first of all, I got to connect with all the other women that made the list. And second of all, it just really brought home to me how important that platform is to what we do. PNAA, Pacific Northwest Aerospace Alliance, is like a subset of that platform. It is an organization of diverse people and organizations that are somehow connected to the aerospace industry. Well, it's really important to be a part of that organization because, like LinkedIn, it's a way to connect with maybe someone you don't need to know right now, but you may be able to connect them with someone else who might mean something for business or for another networking opportunity. So LinkedIn is just, for me, such a great platform to be part of. It offers so much for me to be able to share with my network. And then also, I always say, once you make a connection with me, please let me know if you see someone in my network that you'd like me to connect you to. I'd be happy to make that connection because that's why we're here. So for all of you on the call or listening later, if you look through my network and there's someone you want to connect to or know more about, ask me. I'm happy to. In fact, just last week, a woman I used to work with connected with me on LinkedIn and sent me a message and said, hey, do you know this person? We're thinking about bringing him on board to our organization. And I was able to connect with one of my connections who knew that person better than me, and it just snowballed. And so there's a lot of great opportunity out there.
That is a really great addition to this conversation because it is important to, also reach out, connect people. I've had that happen and it's amazing. Someone will say, you two should get to know each other. You two should meet. You should talk. And I've also, you can also reach out and say, hey, can you introduce me to this person? And yeah, it is a great way to keep expanding our circles, right? So, Nikki, anything? So this top, I did come across that top Women in Aerospace and thought, what a great idea. So this person that started it, how did it? Who was this again? Because I thought, oh, what a great idea, and for someone to take on that challenge.
It's Matt Higa with Pineapple Empire. He's great guy that he really started this, and quite frankly, that has expanded to people reaching out all over the world as a result of that. And being, I have to tell you, my feed got a whole lot more. Sorry, my feed got a whole lot more interesting after I followed all of the women that were on this group. My feed is full of inspiration now as a result of following all of the people doing. And to the point of what we were talking about earlier, very diverse jobs in the aerospace industry. There's astronauts, and there's pilots, and there's people in manufacturing in that group, and it's really been exciting.
So from that, one of the things that when I first thought about aerospace, I was thinking, because I'm out of the manufacturing world, I was thinking about, companies that make the parts and make the planes, all that. And then there's the whole idea of space travel, space tourism. Now, is that something that's fascinating to me? I don't know if I'd want to, to be honest, that's not on my bucket list right now. I don't think, to go into space. It's funny. I was like, no, I think it's till they learn a bit more. Don't know if
I'm like, sign me up. I'm in.
Yeah,
I'm in.
I don't know. You would think I'd be the first one, but I'm like, I don't know. So let's. So, are you doing any work in that area? Like, I find it fascinating as to what will happen with tourism and space travel. So, is that part of your job or role, or any things that are coming up that we could know about? Inside scoop?
Sure. Nikki, you want me to start?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm so blessed to be with an organization of some amazing engineers that took a concept from one of our customers and are developing the landing gear systems for a space plane. And so our customer, if you look them up online or on YouTube, you're going to see Sierra Space and their space vehicle called Dream Chaser. And this space vehicle is basically an unmanned vehicle that is going to take cargo missions to and from the International Space Station. So it's like a giant drone that is going to take cargo to the International Space Station and bring cargo back. And the eventual plan is for this space plane to actually take human cargo and people to and from the International Space Station. And, when I started working on this project 4 years ago, it was like, really? It sounds like a dream. And, as that launch date gets closer and closer, and as we finish up providing the last of the elements of the landing gear system, it's reality. And it's here. I mean, we all saw William Shatner take a ride in low Earth orbit. So those space planes are happening.
Space planes. Okay, you heard it here on GailNow Live. That is, wow. That is, and it's funny because I know, like, my son would probably be the first on it. We watched. He loves all of those shows. Like, I think it was Interstellar. Where, that was like, it's it. Now that would, I find it interesting. I don't know if I'm like, I don't know if I want to. Don't know. That's interesting. So, which does seem to be counter to most of my my goings on. But so in terms of that with PNAA, is there anything with your organization that ties into this, supporting this type of work, Nikki?
Yeah, so we really support all of the aerospace companies in the Pacific Northwest. So whether that be space or commercial aviation or defense, or even there's some rotorcraft work down in Oregon so we really support all of it. So we actually have a speaker speaking at the conference from Blue Origin. And at our conference in February, we had Blue Origin come and speak about their supply chain. So we've really tried to bring them into the fold to help the entire ecosystem understand the full impact, and especially to the supply chain of the space, the emergence of space. And, you know, quite frankly, it's been great to see, as a longtime person in the industry, this commercial space sector has really invigorated the industry here locally. As far as, you know, people are very excited about space. It's nice to see people really excited about space and sustainability, and all of the new technology that's happening has given aerospace this invigoration that's been very exciting to be a part of.
Well, I must say I'm very intrigued. And of course, we talked about this earlier too, that with, you know, some of the research I'm doing too, looking into the history and how much of it was, you know, government funded. And I didn't realize really how much now it's like really shifted over to private. And if private industry hadn't stepped up, like all of the things that we'd be missing out on and learning about, you know, everything from climate change to what's happening in so many things related to the earth, air, water. Did one of you want to talk maybe anything about that, about the role of private industry in the aerospace space travel world?
Yeah, I think that it's been really interesting to see. And again, it's brought space back to the forefront, whereas when we landed on the moon, it was really the forefront. Everybody wanted to be an astronaut. Everybody wanted to be in space. But, you know, bringing down the cost of space by creating reusable rockets, or to Lori's point, aircraft that actually go and come back, has really helped bring more technology to the industry and created a whole ecosystem to support that. There's, you know, with satellites, people are able to send things up more cheaper, and so more people can do more projects. So you're seeing a lot of things that actually they're doing a lot of research that applies to helping support climate change on Earth that's happening in space, because you can do it at an accelerated pace. And I'm not an expert at space, so there's probably people who could speak much better to that, but it's been interesting, and it's taken it a long way. And we've seen a lot of companies pop up as a result of just a few original Blue Origin SpaceX companies. We're even seeing, you know, the ecosystem, kind of like how Boeing created an ecosystem around here. We're seeing these companies create whole ecosystems to support what they're doing in space and on Earth.
Yeah, and I'll add, there's a whole segment of the commercial industry that is in partnership with NASA and the government. So we see that also. And I don't want to forget that private and public partnership is really important to what we're doing, because again, everything like aviation is regulated by the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration. We have to regulate what we're doing in space, to do it safely and to do it efficiently, and to make meaning out of what we're doing up there. So definitely that private-public partnership is really important.
Well, definitely for curious minds, there's lots to explore out there. And I was listening to a podcast, and they were referencing, it was a New York Times report. I think it was from about a year or 2 years ago, and talking about the role of Elon Musk and SpaceX, and how, because of his investments, one of the things that they were able to bring the cost down, they were, I guess, on the space unit, I'm not using the right terms, but anyways, they was dropping off pieces that were worth millions of dollars. I was like, millions? Can you imagine? Like, you think millions a part that's worth that much money, and imagine if you can either recover it or have it not drop off, I guess. So that to me was fascinating, that because of private investment, that could be that was a cost savings.
Yeah, SpaceX is definitely into taking risks. There are other organizations that are much more risk averse, and then there's those that fall in the middle. So you have, you know, the risk averse organizations that are not on the leading edge, but they're following close behind. like you said earlier, Gail, I'll wait and make sure it's safe and you're going to keep your feet on the ground, right? But it does take those companies who are really willing to take risks and spend the time and money and resources, because we wouldn't be where we are today without those companies taking risks.
Yeah, it takes, and it's, that risk is, I always say, like many things, it's a spectrum. And for anything, right? We take risks doing a lot of different things. I talk around my sign up, suit up, show up, and using curiosity, because there's different things you can take on that are low risk, medium risk, high risk. And most of the things that hold us back are usually lower risk. Here's a story I will share, because I was just talking to someone about this the other day, and it reminded me, because as I was preparing for this show, is you see those little, for lack of a better term, barf bags in planes, right, in the pocket. And I used to always wonder, like, you see them all the time, but I don't see, very seldom do I see someone getting sick, unless it's maybe on a trip back from Mexico, someone has had too much. But then I read an article that said, when planes first were going up, people were like, that was so out, it was their mind. They were afraid and they had this fear. So people were getting off the planes or on the planes, they were throwing up because of it was new to them. And that's why now we don't, because we get on a plane, like, it doesn't seem, we're used to getting on a plane. And like, if you think about it, you're up in an air, like, that's kind of strange, right? To be able to do that, but we've become accustomed to it. So anyways, that was the article I read. And I thought it always stood out to me about our mindset and the power of our minds too.
Absolutely. I hadn't heard that. That's a great story.
Yeah.
On the space note, there's a book called The Space Barons that's incredible if you want to learn more about the space race, the new space race.
Well, I also heard a young woman, I was trying to find her talk, but it's not posted yet. I was at the TEDx talk in St. George, Utah, and it's a young woman speaking about space, and I'll have to dig up her name again because I didn't have time to try to track her down, but that's one of the topics she was talking, and that was quite fascinating as well. So wow. Well, we're coming to the top of the hour, and so we'll drop in the comments for people that still want to register for the event in Seattle, May 20th, Women in Aerospace. The title is Beyond All Limits. And I will be one of the speakers there. So I'm also excited to learn more about this industry as well. So it's been an exciting journey, and of course, flying there. We also have someone that's dropped in. Kate Johnson said, great discussion. So I think Kate might be in the aerospace world.
She's one of our members. She's has a company called Stride Savings. Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, hello, Kate. Welcome. So this is always great because when you do a show like this, you sort of have the regulars and the people in the manufacturing. So it's nice to see. Always like to welcome our new guests because of our panelists today, guests. So Lori and Nikki, it's been great having you. Now, I usually wrap up with how do you exercise your curious mind? So this can be, anything. Well, I'm just going to leave it at that, because how do you exercise your curious mind? Who wants to go first?
Go ahead, Lori.
Okay. So, Gail, I was thinking about this, and what came to mind is how hard it is for me to exercise my curious mind, because as a young professional, I was curious. I always have had lots of questions. And when I was a young professional, I actually had my own consulting firm. And I was able to ask the questions of my clients that I needed to get the scope and understand the timeline and what the client was trying to accomplish. When I went into the corporate world after that, I was actually criticized for asking too many questions. And that was really a challenge for me, because I left my marketing consulting business and I went into tech. and in information systems. And I was always a user of tech and never really the one to understand the behind the scenes. And so as I worked with software engineers and database administrators and database analysts and business analysts, this was like a whole new world to me, and I needed to understand it, and I was curious. But they weren't ready for all the questions. And so I've had to develop some ways to understand the different people that I work with and how best to approach them with my curiosity. So, for example, if I was working with an engineer who was had a very large ego, then my approach had to be, hey, you're the expert in this, and I need you to help me learn, a little bit about your expertise so I can do my job, and really play to that person's expertise. Or, depending on their personality, if they were not an extrovert and they just kind of wanted to stay behind the scenes and do their work, but it was important that I understand, what they were testing and how they approached investigating when there was a failure or a bug. Then I had to find a way to engage them with my curiosity. So I think that's been my approach, is trying to be adaptable to whoever I was being curious with, and find a way to engage them with my curiosity.
Well, one thing I'll add to that, I think sometimes you have to get curious about being curious, because that's exactly like it's much easier as a consultant to be curious than sometimes in a workforce. And a lot of that's, you said it really well, Lori. It's about getting curious about who are the people you're dealing with, because you do have to sometimes adapt your message. And I think as a consultant, even I know my clients, and I can kind of have a choice over some of the clients, which also makes a difference, because whereas in a workplace, you sometimes don't have those same choices. So yeah, it really is. That's a really good point. I think that you can still ask the questions. You just maybe have to ask them a bit differently, but still not give up on being curious. Okay, Nikki.
I've been curious my whole life. My mom always jokes because I would say, "What means that? What means that?" Obviously, I've corrected my English a little bit since then, but I was always very curious as a child. And, the thing that curiosity has really served me in this role that I'm in now, because I'm curious about how everyone does things, because I like to be able to pull back and see how things connect and how we can use best practices and things. So I'm constantly asking people, how did you do that? What didn't work? What worked? And trying to find ways to connect the dots. And especially a great example is really understanding the workforce in Europe versus in the US, and how we do things differently, and just really leaning in and asking a ton of questions. And to Lori's point, it's probably gotten annoying to many people in my life that I ask so many questions, but really just leaning into trying to figure out how things work. I want to know how everything works, down to you can't just tell me to do something. I want to know why we're doing it and what it connects to, and all of the things and the mechanics that go into it. So really, I love being curious, just to kind of see the overview effect, if you'd like to use the space term, of how things connect to each other and how we can, do things for the better moving forward.
Yeah, I'll say, Nikki, it's being on the PNAA board, and our relationship getting even closer has just been fantastic. It's so great to work with you and the team.
You too, Lori, and you've been an amazing addition to our board. Thank you.
And we'll put this up. So thank you for this. We want to invite people to go to the PNAA.net, and you can go to the events calendar and sign up. Sign up, suit up, and show up.
We'll
see you there, Gail.
Well, sorry, we're going to say something else?
Looking forward to seeing you there.
All right. Well, it's going to be exciting. And Thank you for joining us today. And also, I want to thank everybody from your guests as well as some of the manufacturing people that came out, because I hope that, like we said at the start, that there's an opportunity to also see what we can share in terms of information between the various industries, because there's a lot of people that make things behind the scenes, and that all relates back to manufacturing. And then you get to all the fun stuff like space travel and going into space and airplanes. And because I must say, it is fascinating to have, the ability to travel by air. That is certainly an amazing addition to our world, that's for sure. So, all right. And we definitely need more people getting in the industry. We didn't get into this today, but I know there's also issues of we need more pilots. We need, there's lots of things that need to change, but that's a story for another day. So, okay. I'll just have you go back into the green room and I'll be there shortly. I'm just going to wrap up a bit.
Thank you, Gail. Take care.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks everyone for coming out today. It was great learning about a new industry. Definitely, I've exercised my curious mind of late in learning a bit more about aerospace, and also how that ties into the world of plastics, to the world of manufacturing, plastic injection molding, where I have spent some time. Because what I'm learning more and more is that there are more things that we have in common than we have differences. And that applies to a lot of things in life and in the world, and in, that famous quote of Walt Whitman's that was also on Ted Lasso was, "Be curious, not judgmental." And that will make our world a better place. When we can really grasp that idea and concept, we will be open to new ideas, seeing new things differently, and we can start sharing some of these stories. Just like the stories we heard from Lori and Nikki today, there are fascinating stories everywhere. And a lot of these stories aren't being shared. And there is opportunity for everyone out there in various industries to basically start signing up, suiting up, and showing up. So if you would like to get in touch with me, please drop me a direct message or connect with me through LinkedIn. I'm also on Twitter as GailNow, and Instagram as GailNow1, and TikTok as GailNow as well. And you can find all previous shows on my GailNow YouTube channel. So if you want to go back and catch some previous shows, or if you missed part of today, you can go there as well. Okay. Thanks everyone for coming out. Stay tuned. We have more great guests coming up over the next few weeks, and also another trade show in the works as well. So have a great day and a great evening and a great morning.